The entire world waits while a dog makes a decision. Decisions made. What a thing. Now we can start. You can actually start at any point in time because it doesn't matter. What matters is something that I think we all try to just spend time figuring out. Look, something that has really stood out to me and something I just want to babble on about, something that I think we, in more cases than we know, run into and affects each of us in some way. You remember standards? You remember how things used to have standards, principles? Like there was a set thing that you had to be able to do to get to do this other thing. People had to be capable of the job in order to do the job or even get the job or have the job. You needed to be able to do the work to pass the class. You needed to be able to maintain some sort of skill set in order to advance in a career. It was sort of like pitched to us as this just it's a thing that got you to do the things that you were supposed to do according to society in the first third of your life. You go to school, you get your grades, you listen to mom, you listen to dad, you treat the elders in a certain way, you do your chores, you do your job, you make, your early money, paper route, whatever job you have, grocery store, paper route, grocery store were the ones I had. You make sure that then you go off to college or you go to trade school or you do this next step that's just sort of the intrinsic next thing that you do in life, in society, and then you get the thing or you get to go do the thing. Now, I've always known there were two ways in life that you can work your way up the hierarchy of whatever industry you're in or whatever social scene you're in. And it's either you just have the ability, you just sort of have this tenacity, this sort of natural skill set. I think we kind of call it talent. Or you just have an interest in something really early on in life. And so you're just really good at it. You're seeing a lot of the people who in the late 80s, early 90s were really into computers. They're now awesome, right? Because they built big tech. Back then, you were just somebody who was into something that was kind of nerdy and dorky. Well, turned out that worked out because you happened to be building a skill in something that you were good at. That's the one way that you can sort of move up. A lot of people do it through sort of like if you're a professional athlete, right? You do this sport, and then once you're done with the sport, if you have a successful career, now you have an entry point to things that otherwise you would have had to do a lot of work to get to. You're taken seriously in arenas where you have no skill because that's just how you got there. Michael Jordan wants to give his opinion on something. I'm listening. I don't care what it is. I'm listening. The other way to get there is what we created as a society, which is credentialism. You go to school, you get a degree that proves you can do a thing, then you go into that industry and maybe you do that thing, or you're the 90% of people that don't do anything with the degree they have. They go do something totally different, or they fall into something different. All of those things were at least they were sold to me, sold to us. I don't think I'm the only one who notices this, who's felt this way. Was sold to us as this idea that you were capable, that the best people in the world at being a stockbroker, they were in New York City or London. The best people at being cowboys were in Texas doing cowboy stuff. The best people at designing clothes and fashion, they were in Milan or they were in New York and in Paris, of course. The best musicians would be in the hubs. The best country people, they're from Nashville or in Nashville. The best movie stars, actors, they're in Los Angeles. The best theater actors, they're in New York. And then the whole thing started to dissolve a little bit because the two ways to get in, meaning you have the thing and you go off and you build the business right out of high school or whenever you go and do it, or you have the degree from the fine institution that leverages a network of alumni or people within an industry and they place you and then eventually you learn the job and you become one of the many people who are really great at that job or that function or that part of life. And then all of a sudden, I want to tell you now that it was somewhere around my 30s, I started to notice that in most arenas, there were people who were fantastically incapable of what they were doing. I think that we don't really push back on the idea that politicians are incapable of their job. We just kind of let them. I don't know why we do that. We don't push back on entertainers not necessarily being great, because we understand that that's subjective. Like, there's no best comedian, because we all have a different sense of humor. There's also no worst comedian, because we all have a different sense of humor. There are certainly people who are more popular because there are broader swaths of particular types of humor, which I tend to believe is actually curated to us by the era we live in, because if you go to the most popular comedian 50 years ago, they're not funny now. But this idea of standards was kind of woven into everything. And now I sit back and I look at the society that I am in, that we are in, that we're a part of, and in most places, there is no standard. The person who is the CEO is absolutely not the best person for that job in that company, even in a lot of cases. I would say CEO is probably a terrible example, because it's so exposed to circumstance that you pretty much get found out right away. But these protected positions that are just below the top, right? We've seen human resources, diversity, equity, and inclusion create a back road into the C-suite. You used to have to work 40 years to get into the C-suite. And now, if you play your cards right and you're the right type of person by demographic and demographic alone, or identity, really, you can just get there. Like, good on you for leveraging the system. You figured out how to manipulate something, right? And then you got into a position of power that you didn't earn. The son of the owner, who has been grandfathered in because, yes, okay, so he grew up around it, and of the 4 kids, maybe showed a proclivity and an interest in what this company does. And so now he has taken over for dad when dad retires, and he actually knows his stuff. Okay, cool, great. Not always the case. There is, and perhaps it is a perpetuated idea from bitterness and cynicism, but there are a lot of instances where somebody who is in the family gets a job they absolutely do not deserve, and they bring the entire company down. And you, who has worked there for 15 years, suddenly have to be under somebody who does not meet the standard. They don't have the ability. They don't have they don't even have the proclivity for the sector they're in. They just happen to have the access to it. And I think the more we get desperate as a society, the harder money is to come by, the more we are likely to say, you know what, I'm just gonna go the safe road. I'm gonna go do the family business because that's what's there for me, as opposed to stretching and going to do the thing that you really wanted to do. And you become a supporting character in your own life. You get cast to the side on the road of your own life because someone doesn't have any standards, because the standards aren't met. Take my own industry, right? I've spent years of my life in acting, both theater, film, and television. You can spend 15 years going through college and going all the way up through the finest acting institutions, to Yale, to Tisch, to USC, whatever, Central School of Speech and Drama, whatever. And then you go to the audition, you get called back, and then it's between you and 3 other people. And you went through the road that takes a lot of work to go to the fine schools, which takes a lot to get qualified to get into, right? And you do all the work, you do all the stuff, all the things, you jump through all the hoops. And then you find out that it's between you and somebody from the Ford modeling agency, somebody with an awfully familiar last name, and somebody else who went through the entire audition process and also went to some institution somewhere. There are no standards. If it took you the education that is equivalent to a doctor to get into that room, and the other person who was in the same room as you for the same thing, equally likely, equally qualified in the eyes of the people who choose who gets the gig, who gets the job, and they are a model who never ever spent a single day learning a craft that this job is about, then there are no standards. If you go into a hospital and you need a kidney surgery, and you get to pick between 3 people, one of them is a doctor, a nephrologist, somebody who literally specializes in this. The other person is somebody who looks really, really good in a white coat. And then the other person is somebody who knows the person who owns the hospital. What are you picking? Well, you're picking the nephrologist, because in that case there are standards, because it affects you immediately and it affects society at large. So what occurred to me was, I've been bitter about this for a long time, and I've made complete peace with it, because this is the game that we're all in, and this is also the thing that I signed up for. But I don't think it's something a lot of people that are younger understand. So I want to tell you a little story about when I learned this. Or I didn't learn it, the first time I was exposed to it, and then what I learned from it as a result throughout life. When I was a kid, I collected Magic the Gathering cards. It's a card game that a lot of people play when they're younger, and then it follows them through life or they move away from it. And it's basically just, you create a deck of cards, 60 cards, that you put together in a way that you think strategically is going to allow you to execute your game plan. And, there are different creatures and lands and all this stuff. It doesn't really matter. There are two sides to the game. There's the game itself, and then there's the collecting of rare cards and selling them and trading them. So I wanted to get into it when I was a kid, so I went down to the local bookstore, and my friend's dad was the one who ran the bookstore, and he was behind the counter, which is what he always preferred to do. And I went in, and I had my paper route money, and I was like, I want to do Magic. I want to do Magic the Gathering. Because I wanted to get the valuable cards. I wanted to get into that side of the game. I didn't really care too much about learning how to play the game. I wanted to learn, or how do you get these rare cards, and how do you then trade and hustle in a way. Nothing disingenuous, nothing dishonest. There were actual stores that you could go into in Copenhagen who would buy your cards from you, but you weren't doing the game, which is what the cards were made for. So go down to the bookstore, use my paper route money to get these cards. And there are like 6 or 7 different kinds of Magic cards. And my friend's dad goes, hey, this is the new one. You should get that one. So I get that one. I buy them. I unpack them. And I do that for a few months, build up a collection. And I have a couple of rare ones, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Learn to play a little bit, try to do some trading with some friends. It was fine. It wasn't really a big thing, but I kept collecting because I knew that I could go down to this store called Pharaoh's Cigar, which is based off of a Tintin comic, but it's the premier shops for collectibles in Copenhagen. There are quite a few of them. They're still there. You should totally go check them out. I went down there because they had a tournament, and I'd finally felt like I was good enough, and I kind of wanted to play, but I really just wanted to see what could I get from my collection. So I'm a kid. I'm younger than everybody there, and I've got my collection of cards, and I've spent like a year's worth of paper route money on this stuff, right? And I've got my rares, and I've got them just right there on perfect condition, because the condition of the card matters. And I go in, and I'll never, ever, ever forget this interaction for the entirety of my life, because it wasn't just about Magic cards and commerce. It was about life at large and standards. I opened my binder proudly to this man behind the counter, who, God bless him for being gentle. He looked at him and he goes, "Oh, cool." And I thought, well, what about these first, 18? They're all rares and valuables. And he looks at them, and then he looks at me, and he pieces together what I don't know yet. And it is that the cards that I was buying were from a series called Portal. Portal was a training deck. So this entire time I've been spending my money on cards that don't count in the game. You can't even use them in a tournament, let alone trading them. And the rares are not that rare because they're printed far more common, because you're just in a training setting. And I realized that you can spend all your energy, all your time, and all your money on school. And when you show up to the real game, all of those things you did in school, all those assignments, they don't matter. They're irrelevant because it was theoretical. It doesn't matter that you spent $60,000 a year. What matters is what you're able to do once you show up to the real game, because standards matter. So are you able to play the game, the Magic game? Are you able to forget that all of that time you spent and wasted on school and credentialism didn't really matter, because it matters what you're able to do when you get into that room? Are you able to put that aside? because the model has gotten there by using a completely different road, and you've been told that your road is the one that has prestige and the one that should count. Are you able to toss all that aside and go into that room and then deliver on a skill basis? That was what always mattered, because those were standards. You had to have standards. Now, I could have just walked around with that set of portal cards, because the academy, the metaphor that this is for school, the academy, has literally stepped out of its position in the line of things that we've created as institutions in life to take a human being from infancy into usable, helpful, positive member of society. It's removed itself from that and become the real world. You remember how you used to always say, yeah, but the real world will come one day. Just wait, the real world's going to check their attitude. There are a lot of people for whom the real world does never show up, ever. Because the academy has built such a massive ecosystem now that you can just stay in school. You can just keep playing Portal Magic theory cards. You could just keep playing the training tournament, because there are so many people at the training tournament now, that has become an ecosystem unto itself. You are no longer being trained to the standards of what was the real world, because the standards of the real world, to my eye at least, have become so obfuscated by feeling and ideology, which are harbored inside of the academy, that it doesn't matter what your standards are. It doesn't matter what the requisite is. Do you know that you can buy a boat up to, I think, 65 feet and just sail it off the harbor? Like, unless you're charging somebody to be on board, you can literally just sail off. Doesn't that strike you as crazy? Isn't that a little nuts? Our society, as far as I can tell, is fraying because we forfeit comfort and emotional satiation for standards. We've just given up on standards completely. And yes, I have an example within an industry that's not essential. It's entertainment, and entertainment's always kind of been BS. But I'm seeing this in all kinds of arenas. I'm seeing this, as I mentioned before, in politics, but I also see this in the medical field. Pill pushers, pain management specialists that don't look at you, they're just regarding you for what you can get them as a paycheck. People who are in positions of power locally that don't know what they're doing. People who are openly hypocrites that we don't hold to a standard. I can't tell you how many times I've seen something outrageous happen and known nothing would come of it. Nothing will be done because there are no standards. And we've gotten really used to that. The thing that makes you order Uber Eats or DoorDash or whatever delivery service you preference over going to the grocery store is you lowering your standards. We men, we have lowered our standards routinely for over 60 years to the detriment of everybody. Standards have completely evaporated from the majority of places where they need to exist because a standard is held up by integrity. And integrity is the mortar that keeps the bricks of society linked together in a way where they can count on each other without constantly having the paranoia of needing to check each other. You can't make changes, you can't get better, you can't move forward if there aren't any standards. And they have to be maintained and they have to be enforced. Life can be so good. In the same way that the bottom 1% affects more of your life than the 1% at the top because of standards. You're herded into believing that there's an issue because people have an extraordinary amount of wealth and there are other people who are poor. I agree, that's a problem. But on a Monday, is the junkie on the bus the issue? Or is it Elon Musk? Ask yourself that, and then consider the kind of standards that you maintain when you adjudicate the world around you, and then what you think should and shouldn't change and what energy you put into where. Because odds are, like me, you're just being herded into an opinion so that you can move on in your perpetual search for a better feeling than the one you have right now. I love each and every one of you. I try to love myself, but nothing on this world I love as much as my dog Littlefoot. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me babble on. Bye.